The moon hung thin and broken over the clearing near the Gila River, casting shadows that moved like living things across the red earth. The air smelled of sage and something older, something that had no name in English or Apache. 7 men sat in a circle around a fire that barely held its flame against the night wind. Their faces were carved from stone, and sorrow, each line a map of decisions no man should have to make. Elder Naki was the oldest among them, his back bent like a question mark, his hands steady despite their tremor. He had seen 70 winters come and go across these mountains. He had watched children grow into warriors and warriors fade into dust. But tonight his eyes held something different. Tonight they held the weight of a choice that would haunt him until his own bones found their rest beneath the cottonwood trees. The silence stretched between the men like a rope pulled too tight. Finally Naki spoke, his voice low and rough as wind over stone. "It has returned. The White One. 3 children in the first year, a family of 5 in the second. This year it took 2 hunters and left nothing but blood on the rocks. We cannot fight it. We cannot run from it. The old ways say there is only one path left to us." The other elders did not meet his eyes. They knew what path he meant. They had known before they sat down. Coming here was not about making the decision. It was about learning to live with it afterward. One of the younger men, Chato, a warrior with scars across his chest and doubt in his heart, leaned forward. His shadow flickered against the rocks behind him. "You speak of the prophecy, the bridge between worlds. But who among us can claim to understand what the spirits want? How do we know this will end it?" Naki turned his gaze to the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes made them look hollow, like the eyes of a man already dead. 20 years ago I saw it. The skinwalker, the white bear that walks like shadow and hungers like winter. My brother offered himself. He was a brave man, strong with a heart full of honor. The bear took him, it ate him, and it did not stop. Because his heart was not pure, it was filled with anger at the world, with bitterness at his fate. The spirits will not accept a warrior's pride. They want something else. They want someone who has nothing left to prove. The fire popped. Sparks rose into the darkness and died before they reached the stars. Another elder, a man named Kuruk, whose son had been taken the year before, spoke through teeth clenched against grief. Then who among us fits this cursed measure? The answer hung in the air before anyone said it. They all knew. They had always known. The one who stands apart. The one who was born different. Nilnish. The name fell like a stone into still water. Ripples of silence followed. Chato shook his head slowly. "She is one of us. To offer her like meat to a beast, it is not the Apache way." Naki's voice came back harder now, edged with the kind of pain that turns into iron. "She has been apart since birth. The spirits marked her, made her too tall, too strong, too different for this world or the next. Perhaps this is why. Perhaps she was always meant for this." The decision was made not with words, but with the way each man looked away from the others and into the fire. They would not call it murder. They would call it necessity. They would call it tradition. They would call it anything but what it was, a sacrifice born of fear. 2 miles downriver, Nilnish sat alone on a flat rock that jutted over the water. The current moved below her like a living thing, dark and cold and indifferent. She held her hands under the surface, letting the chill numb the cuts across her palms. She had been splitting wood all day. No one asked her to. No one ever asked her to do anything. They simply expected. And she gave because giving was easier than fighting for a place that would never be hers. She was 28 years old and had been alone for most of them. Her earliest memory was of her mother turning away, not in disgust, not in hatred, just turning away because looking at her daughter required a kind of courage her mother did not possess. Nilnish had been 5 years old already, taller than children twice her age, already strong enough to carry water jugs meant for grown women. She did not understand then why the other children threw stones. She did not understand why their parents pulled them away when she approached. She understood now. The word they used was curse. The word she used was loneliness. Her father had been different. He was a warrior, respected, fierce in battle, and gentle at home. He looked at her, not with fear, but with a kind of sad recognition, as if he saw something in her that reminded him of himself. He taught her to track, to move silently through brush, to read the land like a language. And he gave her the rifle. The Springfield, a weapon of war, heavy and brutal and honest. He had taken it from a dead soldier during a raid when Naalnish was 10. He cleaned it every night by the fire, and one evening when she was 12, he set it in her hands. This will be yours when you are old enough, not because you are my daughter, but because strength without heart is a curse. You have strength, Naalnish. Now you must find the heart to match it. 3 months later, he died. A raid by cavalry, a bullet through the chest. He bled out in her arms, his hand gripping hers, his last words lost in the rattle of his breath. Her cousin, a man named Daklugie, took the rifle the day after the burial. He told the elders that Naalnish was unfit to carry it, that a woman, especially one cursed by size and strangeness, had no right to a warrior's weapon. The elders did not argue. They rarely argued with men who spoke loudly and often. Naalnish did not fight for it. She had learned by then that fighting only made people hate her more. She pulled her hands from the water now and studied them in the moonlight. They were scarred, calloused, capable of breaking bone or shaping wood. What good was strength if it only made you more alone? A sound behind her. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. She turned and saw Chato emerging from the shadows of the cottonwoods. He stopped 10 feet away, his face unreadable. The elders wished to speak with you. She nodded once. She knew this moment had been coming. You could feel these things in the air, in the way people stopped talking when you walked past, in the way their eyes slid over you like you were already a ghost. She stood. Even sitting, she had been taller than most men. Standing, she was a monument. 6 feet and 8 inches of bone and muscle and quiet resignation. Chato did not flinch, but his jaw tightened. They walked in silence back to the clearing. The fire was lower now, coals glowing like the eyes of something patient and hungry. The elders sat waiting. Naalnish stopped at the edge of the circle. No one offered her a place to sit. Naki spoke without preamble. The skinwalker has returned. It will not stop until it is satisfied. The prophecy says only one who stands between worlds can end this. You know what we ask. Naalnish looked at each of them in turn. She saw guilt in some faces, resolve in others, relief in most. They were asking her to die so that they could live, and they expected her to agree because what else did she have to live for? The silence stretched. Finally she spoke, her voice low and even. Where Naki blinked, surprised not by her answer, but by how quickly it came. The sacred cottonwood, near the canyon mouth. Tomorrow at dusk. We will bind you there. The rest is in the hands of the spirits. Naalnish did not ask what binding meant. She did not ask if there was another way. She did not ask for time to think, because deep in the hollow place where her heart should have been, a terrible thought had taken root. If my death has meaning, then perhaps my life finally will too. She nodded once. I will come. The elders exhaled as one. It was done. They did not thank her. Gratitude would have required acknowledging what they were doing. Instead, they simply stood and walked away one by one until only Naki remained. He looked at her for a long moment, his face shadowed and strange. You are braver than any warrior I have known. She met his eyes without blinking. I am not brave. I am tired. He nodded slowly, then reached into his robe and pulled out a small knife, the handle wrapped in leather, worn smooth by decades of use. He set it on the ground near her feet. If the pain becomes too great, you do not have to wait. Then he too walked away, leaving her alone with the dying fire and the knowledge that tomorrow she would become what she had always been, a thing to be left behind. She did not sleep that night. She sat outside her small shelter, a lean-to built against the trunk of a juniper tree at the edge of the camp. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant and uncaring. She counted them the way a prisoner counts days. She had done this as a child when the loneliness felt too large to carry. It was a way of reminding herself that she was small, that her pain was small, that nothing she felt mattered in the face of the vast indifferent universe. It helped. A little. When dawn came pale and reluctant, she stood and walked to the river one last time. She washed her face and hands. She braided her hair. She put on her cleanest dress, the one her mother had made when Nyalnish was 16, before the distance between them became too wide to cross. The stitching was fine and careful. Her mother had been good with her hands, even if she had not been good with her heart. Nyalnish spent the day working. She split wood. She carried water. She mended a hole in the roof of an old woman's shelter. The woman did not speak to her, did not thank her, just watched with eyes that held something like pity and something like relief. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, Nyalnish walked toward the canyon mouth. She did not look back. The sacred cottonwood stood alone in a clearing ringed by red stone cliffs. Its trunk was massive, its branches spread like arms reaching for something they would never touch. Petroglyphs covered the rocks around it. Ancient symbols carved by people long dead, spirals and handprints and figures that might have been human or might have been something else. The elders were waiting. They had already prepared the ropes. Naki stepped forward. His hands shook as he gestured to the tree. Nyalnish walked to it without hesitation. She pressed her back against the rough bark and raised her arms above her head. Two young men, barely more than boys, came forward with the ropes. Their hands trembled as they worked. They bound her wrists to a low branch, pulling the rope tight until her arms were stretched and her feet barely touched the ground. Then they bound her ankles together. The pain was immediate, sharp and burning across her shoulders, a dull ache in her calves. She did not make a sound. Naki came close enough that she could see the tears in his eyes that he refused to let fall. "May the spirits grant you peace." She almost laughed. Peace was not what the spirits granted women like her. But she said nothing. The elders left. One by one they walked away until she was alone in the clearing with the tree and the petroglyphs in the coming night. The sun sank lower. Shadows grew long and strange. Her shoulders began to burn in earnest now, the muscles screaming against the weight of her own body. She closed her eyes and tried to think of something good, some memory worth holding on to. She found only empty rooms and turned backs, so she opened her eyes and looked at the sky instead. The stars were beginning to emerge, faint points of light against the deepening blue. She counted them. 1, 2, 3, 20, 50. She was still counting when she heard the first sound. Not a growl, not a howl, something between the two. Low and resonant and wrong, like the earth itself was breathing. Her heart, which had been so quiet, so resigned, suddenly kicked against her ribs. Her body, which had accepted its fate, now flooded with adrenaline. The animal part of her, the part that had kept her ancestors alive through 1,000 generations of predators and prey, screamed at her to run. But she could not run. She could only wait. The sound came again. Closer now, from the north where the canyon narrowed into shadow. And then she saw it. Not clearly, not all at once. Just a shape moving between the rocks. Too large to be a wolf, too deliberate to be a bear. It moved like smoke, like something that did not quite obey the laws of muscle and bone. Her breath came shallow and fast. She forced herself to slow it, to focus. If she was going to die, she would die with her eyes open. The shape moved closer. She could see it now, silhouetted against the last light of the sun. A bear. Enormous. 12 feet tall at the shoulder when it rose on its hind legs. Its fur was white, not the yellow white of age, but the pure white of snow and bone. And its eyes were white too. No pupils, no iris. Just blank circles that glowed faintly in the dusk. It stopped 20 feet away and stared at her, not with hunger, not with curiosity, with something that felt almost like recognition. Nyalnish stared back. Her heart hammered. Her hands were numb. Her shoulders felt like they were tearing from their sockets, but she did not look away. The bear took a step forward, then another, slowly, testing, and then from the west, a sound that shattered the silence. A gunshot. The crack echoed off the canyon walls like thunder. The bear flinched, its massive head swinging toward the source of the sound. A bullet struck the ground 3 feet in front of it, kicking up dust and stone. Another shot, this one closer to the bear's flank. The creature roared. Not the roar of an animal, but something deeper, something that made the air itself vibrate. It dropped to all fours and lunged not at Nalnish, but toward the unseen shooter. Then it stopped, turned, looked back at her one more time with those blank white eyes, and vanished into the canyon shadows like mist burning off in the sun. Footsteps. Running. A man emerged from the rocks to the west, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the clearing. He was white, tall, but not as tall as her, lean and hard, the kind of body built by years of work and hunger. His face was weathered, his eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty trail clothes and a hat pulled low. He stopped when he saw her. For a long moment he just stared, his rifle still raised as if he could not quite believe what he was seeing. Then he lowered the weapon and walked toward her, slow, careful. He pulled a knife from his belt and reached up to cut the ropes at her wrists. The moment the tension released, Nalnish's arms dropped like dead weight. Her legs buckled. She started to fall. The man caught her, one arm around her waist, steadying her weight. She could feel the heat of his body against hers, smell the dust and sweat and gunpowder. She pushed him away, hard. He stumbled back, surprised. She stood swaying, her legs trembling but holding. She glared at him, her voice hoarse but steady. "You should not have done that." The man blinked. He spoke, his voice low and rough. "You would rather I left you there?" She did not answer, could not answer, because the truth was too complicated and too raw. He crouched and cut the ropes at her ankles, then stepped back, giving her space. He studied her with the kind of look that was not afraid, but not indifferent either. The look of a man trying to understand a puzzle. "What the hell were you doing tied to a tree?" Nalnish straightened slowly, every muscle screaming. She met his eyes. "Saving my people. Until you stopped me." The man frowned. He glanced back toward the canyon where the bear had disappeared. "That thing was going to kill you." "Yes." His frown deepened. "And you wanted that?" She did not answer. She turned and began to walk, her steps unsteady, toward the north. The man called after her. "Where are you going?" "Away from here. Away from you." He jogged to catch up, falling into step beside her. She did not look at him. "You can barely walk. That thing is still out there. You will not make it a mile." She kept walking. "That is not your concern." He grabbed her arm. Not hard, just enough to stop her. She turned, her eyes blazing, and he let go immediately, raising his hands. "I am not your enemy." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, to her own surprise, she felt something crack inside her. The weight of the day. The weight of her whole life. It all pressed down at once. Her legs gave out. This time she did not push him away when he caught her. He lowered her to the ground, pulling a canteen from his belt and offering it to her. She drank the water, cold and sharp against her throat. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What is your name, Luke?" "Luke Mercer." She nodded. The world swayed around her, exhaustion and pain and confusion crashing over her in waves. "I am Nalnish." He nodded back, then stood and scanned the horizon. The last light was dying. Darkness was coming fast. "I have a cabin, 2 miles south. You can rest there. Figure out what to do in the morning." She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to leave her here, that she deserved whatever came next, but her body betrayed her. She could not stand, could not walk, could not do anything but accept. He helped her to her feet, then whistled. A horse emerged from the rocks, a sturdy roan with intelligent eyes. Luke lifted her into the saddle with surprising ease considering her size. Then he swung up behind her, his arm coming around to steady her. They rode in silence through the gathering dark. Nalnish's head grew heavy. She leaned back against him, not out of trust, but because she had no strength left to hold herself upright. Behind them, far off in the canyon, something howled. Not a wolf, not a coyote. Something older. Luke's arm tightened around her waist. He urged the horse faster. The cabin was small and solid, built against the base of a red stone cliff. One room, a narrow bed, a small stove, shelves lined with tins and jars, a table with 2 chairs. The walls were rough-cut wood chinked with mud and dried grass. Luke helped her down from the horse and guided her inside. He lit a lamp, the warm glow pushing back the shadows. Nalnish stood in the center of the room, swaying slightly. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the ropes had cut. Her shoulders throbbed. Her dress was torn at the side. Luke pulled a blanket from the bed and draped it over her shoulders. He gestured to the bed. "Sit, rest. I will get water." She sat slowly, lowering herself onto the edge of the mattress. It was the first soft thing she had touched in months, maybe years. Luke filled a tin cup from a bucket and handed it to her. She drank without speaking. He moved to the stove, stirring the coals back to life, adding wood. The cabin began to warm. He pulled a small box from under the table and brought out a strip of clean cloth and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. "This will sting." He poured the whiskey over the cloth and gently pressed it to her wrist. She flinched but did not pull away. He worked carefully, cleaning the wounds, wrapping them with fresh strips of cloth. When he finished, he stepped back and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You said you were saving your people. From that bear?" She nodded. "It is called Ko-Nutso, the white bear, a skinwalker. It has killed 8 people in 2 years. The elders said the only way to stop it was to offer a bridge between worlds, someone who belongs to neither the living nor the dead. Someone cursed." Luke's expression did not change, but his eyes darkened. "And you agreed to this?" She met his gaze. "I am not cursed, but they believe I am. I am too tall, too strong, too different. They have feared me since I was a child. If my death could finally make me useful to them, then perhaps it was worth it." Luke shook his head slowly. "That is not how it works. Dying for people who hate you does not make them love you. It just makes you dead." She looked down at her hands. "I know." Silence filled the cabin. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Finally, Luke spoke again. "What will you do now?" She did not answer. She did not know. He pushed off the wall and moved to the far corner, pulling out a worn bedroll. He spread it on the floor near the door. "You take the bed. I will sleep here." She looked at him, confused. Why what? Why help me? You do not know me. I could be dangerous." A faint smile crossed his face, the first she had seen. "You are dangerous. I saw you standing there tied to that tree, staring down a monster. But dangerous does not mean evil." He lay down on the bedroll, pulling his coat over himself like a blanket. He set his rifle within arm's reach. "Get some rest. We will figure things out in the morning." Nalnish did not move for a long time. She sat on the edge of the bed, the blanket around her shoulders, watching this strange man who had pulled her from death without asking for anything in return. Finally, she lay back, too exhausted to think anymore. The mattress was soft. The cabin was warm. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that was not quite safety, but was close enough to matter. Her eyes closed. Sleep came fast and heavy. Luke did not sleep. He lay on the floor with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. His mind ran through the events of the day like a man retracing his steps to find where he went wrong. He had not been looking for her. He had been looking for Key, the boy, the son of his closest friend, the child he had raised for 3 years after the boy's father fell ill with consumption. Tarak had been a good man, an Apache scout who worked with the army, who taught Luke the language and the land and the difference between surviving and living. When Tarak died, his last words had been a plea. "Find my son. Do not let him forget who he is." Luke had tried. He had taken Key in, taught him to ride, to shoot, to read. He had loved that boy the way he had loved his own son, the one who lived only 3 days before fever took him. Key had filled that empty space in Luke's chest, had given him a reason to wake up in the morning. And then 4 months ago, Key ran away. No note, no explanation, just gone. Luke had been tracking him ever since, following rumors and sightings, asking at trading posts, searching canyon after canyon. Today he had followed tracks that led to the clearing. He had expected to find the boy. Instead, he found a woman tied to a tree and a monster waiting to devour her. He glanced over at Nalnish, her form barely visible in the dim light. She was asleep now, her breathing slow and even. What the hell was he supposed to do with her? He could not just send her back. They had tried to kill her. They would try again, especially now that the ritual was interrupted. But keeping her here was not a solution either. Sooner or later someone would come looking. And Luke was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of losing people. He closed his eyes and tried to quiet his mind. Sleep did not come. It never did. Nalnish woke in the darkest part of the night. A nightmare. She could not remember the details, only the feeling of falling, of being swallowed by something vast and cold. She sat up, breathing hard, her hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that was not there. Across the room Luke stirred. He sat up slowly, his eyes finding hers in the darkness. "You all right?" She nodded, though it was a lie. They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers bound together by violence and chance. Finally, Nalnish spoke, her voice quiet. "Why were you in the canyon?" Luke hesitated. Then, as if the darkness made honesty easier, he answered, "I was looking for someone, a boy, Apache, 9 years old. His name is Key. He ran away 4 months ago. I have been tracking him. Why would he run from you?" Luke's jaw tightened. "Because I am not his father. Because no matter how much I tried, I could not replace what he lost. Maybe he went looking for his people. Maybe he went looking for something I could not give him." Nalnish absorbed this. She understood that kind of searching, that kind of emptiness. "Did you find him?" "No." The word hung between them, heavy with failure and grief. Nalnish lay back down. Luke did the same. Neither spoke again. But in the silence, something shifted. A small recognition. They were both looking for something, both haunted by the people they could not save. Outside, the wind howled, and far off in the canyon, something howled back. Morning came cold and gray. Luke woke first, as he always did. He stoked the fire-heated water, made coffee. The smell filled the cabin, rich and bitter. Nalnish woke to the sound of the tin cup being set on the table near the bed. She sat up slowly, her body a map of pain. Every muscle ached. Her shoulders felt like they had been torn apart and stitched back together wrong. Luke handed her the coffee without a word. She took it, cupping the warmth in her hands. They sat across from each other at the small table. Luke studied her in the morning light. The size of her was even more striking now. She filled the space in a way that made the cabin feel smaller. But there was something else, too. A quietness, a sadness that sat behind her eyes like a permanent guest. He spoke first. "That bear, the skinwalker. Your elders think you were supposed to stop it by dying, but you are still alive. What happens now?" Nalnish set down the cup. "Now it will come for my people, and they will blame me for surviving. They will say I broke the ritual, that I made it worse." Luke leaned back in his chair. "So they will try to finish what they started." She nodded. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment, then made a decision he knew he would regret. "Then you stay here, until we figure something else out." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You do not owe me anything." "I know." "Then why?" He met her eyes. The answer was complicated. Because he had failed to save Key. Because he had failed to save his own son. Because every time he closed his eyes he saw the people he had let down. But all he said was, "Because leaving you there would have made me no better than them." Nalnish held his gaze for a long moment. Then, for the first time since he met her, he saw something soften in her face. Not trust. Not yet. But the beginning of something that might grow into it. She nodded once. "Thank you." He stood, clearing the cups. "Do not thank me yet. We still have to deal with that thing in the canyon, and sooner or later your people will come looking." She stood too, wincing at the pain in her legs. Then we prepare." Luke glanced at her, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "You can fight." She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw the warrior beneath the wounded woman. "I have been fighting my whole life." They spent the morning working. Luke showed her where the water was, where the spare ammunition was kept, how to bar the door from the inside. She listened carefully, memorizing every detail. By midday they were reinforcing the walls, adding extra wood to the shutters, checking sight lines from the windows. Nilnish worked with a kind of focused intensity that Luke recognized. She was a woman who knew how to survive. At one point she lifted a log that would have taken 2 men to carry. Luke stopped watching. She set it in place without breaking a sweat, then turned and caught him staring. Her expression hardened. "You are afraid of me now." He shook his head. "No, I am impressed." She blinked as if the word did not make sense. "Impressed." He picked up his own log and carried it over, setting it next to hers. "You are stronger than anyone I have ever met. That is not something to fear. It is something to respect." She studied him, searching for the lie. She did not find one. They went back to work. As the sun began to set, Luke made a slow circle around the cabin, scanning the horizon. No riders, no movement. But the silence felt wrong, too complete. He came back inside. Nilnish was sitting at the table cleaning a knife she had found among Luke's tools. Her movements were practiced, efficient. Luke pulled his rifle from the wall and set it on the table beside her. "Do you know how to use this?" She looked at the rifle. For a moment something flickered across her face. Pain, longing. "My father had one like it, a Springfield. He taught me to shoot when I was 10. Luke slid the rifle toward her. "Then it is yours. If trouble comes, you do not wait for permission. You shoot." She picked up the rifle, her hands remembering the weight, the balance. She worked the bolt, checked the chamber, sighted down the barrel. Everything smooth and instinctive. She set it back down and looked at him. "Why do you trust me with this?" "Because you earned it." That night they ate in silence. Beans and bread, simple but filling. When the meal was done, Luke pulled out the bedroll again. Nilnish stood. "I will take the floor tonight." Luke shook his head. "You are still healing. Take the bed." She started to argue, then stopped. She was too tired, too sore. She lay down, pulling the blanket over herself. Luke took his place by the door, the rifle across his lap. Before sleep took her, Nilnish spoke into the darkness. "Good night, Luke." It was the first time she had said his name. The sound of it, soft and almost tentative, made something in his chest tighten. "Good night, Nilnish." The next morning brought the thing Luke had been dreading. He was outside checking the horse when he saw it. A figure at the edge of the clearing. Small, unmoving. A boy. Luke's heart stopped. He took a step forward, squinting against the morning light. "Key." The boy stood perfectly still. His face shadowed his clothes, the same ones Luke remembered. Brown wool shirt, dark pants, bare feet. Luke took another step. "Key. Key, is that you?" The boy did not move, did not speak, just stood there staring. Luke broke into a run, his chest tight with hope and fear, and something that felt like drowning. But before he reached the edge of the clearing, a hand closed around his arm. Hard. Nilnish had come out of the cabin. She stood beside him now, her eyes fixed on the boy. "That is not a boy." Luke tried to pull free. "That is Key. That is the boy I have been looking for." Nilnish's grip tightened. "Look at his shadow." Luke looked. The boy stood in full sunlight, but beneath his feet there was no shadow, just empty ground. Luke's blood went cold. The figure tilted its head, a motion too slow, too deliberate to be human. Then it smiled, a wide, wrong smile that showed too many teeth. And then it was gone. Not running, not fading, just gone. Luke staggered back, his breath coming fast and shallow. Nilnish released his arm. Her voice was steady but grim. "That is how the skinwalker hunts. It shows you what you want to see. It knows you are looking for the boy. It will use him against you." Luke turned to her, his face pale. "Then Key is already dead." Nilnish met his eyes. She did not offer false comfort. "I do not know. But if the bear is using his image, then he is either dead or close to it. Luke sank to his knees, the weight of it crushing him. All these months, all this searching, and for what Naalnish crouched beside him. She did not touch him, did not speak. She just waited. Finally Luke's voice came broken and raw. I promised his father I would keep him safe. Naalnish's response was quiet but firm. You cannot keep promises to the dead, only to the living. Luke looked up at her, his eyes red. Then we are both bait now. She nodded. Yes, we are. They stood together facing the empty clearing where the boy had been. The wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of something old and wrong. Somewhere in the canyon the white bear was waiting, and it knew exactly where they were. The morning after the shadowless boy vanished came gray and cold. Luke stood at the cabin window, his knuckles white against the wood frame, staring at the exact spot where the vision had stood. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Key's wrong smile that tilted head the empty ground where a shadow should have been. Behind him, Naalnish sat at the table, sharpening the small knife Elder Naki had left beside the tree. The scrape of metal on stone filled the silence like a slow heartbeat. She understood that sometimes the best comfort was simply being present, a warm body in the room, proving you were not alone in the universe. Luke finally spoke, his voice rough as gravel. How long has it been using the dead to hunt? Naalnish set down the whetstone carefully. The elders say 20 years. Before that it was just a bear, large but natural. Then something changed. Some say it ate sacred buffalo calf meat during famine. Others say a dying shaman cursed it. Stories differ, but the result is the same. It became something between animal and spirit. It feeds on flesh, yes, but also on guilt, on grief, on the weight we carry. Luke turned from the window. His eyes were bloodshot, ringed with exhaustion. It knows about Key, about my promise to his father. I think it knows everything that weighs on your heart. That is how it chooses prey, not by weakness of body but by wounds of the soul. It finds the cracks and widens them until you break from the inside. Luke absorbed this like a man taking a bullet, knowing it would hurt, and there was nothing to be done. Then, I am exactly what it wants. Naalnish stood and crossed to him. Even in the dim morning light she was striking. 6 feet 8 inches of controlled power, her face marked with thin scars, her eyes holding steady recognition rather than pity. We both are. That is why it waits. It lets fear do half the work, makes us imagine our deaths until we are already half gone before it touches us. Luke met her gaze. Something hardened in his expression, shifting from despair to resolve. Then we stop waiting. We hunt it first. Find where it took Key. End this. You want to go to the canyon? It was not a question. He nodded. I need to know if the boy is alive or dead. I need to see. Otherwise I will chase ghosts the rest of my life. She understood that completely. She had lived in that limbo herself, never quite belonging anywhere. Then we go together. But we prepare first. Courage without planning just gets you killed faster. They spent 2 days turning the cabin into a fortress and gathering supplies for the hunt. Luke taught Naalnish the Springfield rifle, how to load the long cartridges, work the bolt until it became instinct, control her breathing before the shot. She learned fast, her hands steady, her focus absolute. In return, she taught him tracking skills he had forgotten. How to read disturbed earth for weight and intent. How to smell the difference between a predator marking territory and one hunting. How to listen to silence itself, because silence had texture, and sometimes that texture screamed warnings. They worked side by side with few words. Communication came through shared movement, through the small gestures that said, I trust you, and I will not abandon you. On the second evening they sat outside, watching the sun die into the mountains. The sky bled red and gold. Naalnish broke the comfortable quiet. Tell me about him. The real Key, not the ghost. Luke was silent so long she thought he might not answer. His hands worked over a piece of leather he was mending, the awl moving in practiced rhythm. Then, slowly, he began. He was 9 when I took him in, small for his age, all elbows and knees, but quick to laugh, quick to anger, quick to forgive. His father Tarak was my translator when I scouted for the cavalry. 2 years we rode together. He taught me Apache, taught me which plants heal and which kill, taught me that honor is not about who you serve, but how you serve. Luke paused, his voice dropping. When Tarak got consumption, he asked me to take Key. The boy's mother had died years before. No family would take a half-blood child. I said yes because Tarak was my friend, but also because I needed it. My own son died 3 years earlier, 3 days old, never even opened his eyes properly. My wife followed 6 months later, just gave up, stopped eating, stopped talking. One morning she stopped breathing like living had become too much work. He looked at the darkening sky. Key filled that hole. Not completely. You cannot replace people. But he gave me reason to keep the fire going. I taught him to ride, to shoot, to read from the only book I owned, Shakespeare plays that belonged to my father. Key was smart, asked questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do men kill each other over land they cannot take to the grave? Luke's voice caught. 4 months ago he ran. I woke up and he was gone. Took a blanket, some food, his extra shirt. Left the wooden horse I carved him sitting on his bedroll like goodbye. I thought maybe he went looking for his people, for something I could not give him. I have been tracking him since, following rumors, until yesterday when I found you instead. He stopped. Now I think maybe the bear took him months ago. Maybe I was following a ghost all along. Nyalnish waited, then spoke carefully. Or maybe he ran for a reason you have not considered. What reason except that I failed him? She chose her words with care. When I was 15, cavalry raided our camp, killed 6 men, took 3 women. My mother was one. They shot her in front of me. I killed 2 soldiers with my bare hands, broke their necks. When I came back covered in their blood, the elders looked at me differently. I had saved lives, but I had also proven I was dangerous. From then on, I was the thing that protected them and the thing they feared. She met his eyes. Sometimes people run not because you failed, but because staying means becoming something they are not ready to be. Maybe Key ran because he was afraid of what he might become, or what you might need him to become. Luke sat with that truth for a long time, feeling its uncomfortable edges. He did not have an answer, so he simply nodded. Nyalnish stood. Tomorrow we go. We find the truth, whatever it is. They left at first light. Luke led his roan mare Nyalnish, walking beside him. They moved northeast through scrub oak and red stone formations that rose like ancient bones from the earth. The land felt old here. You could sense it in the weathered rocks and the petroglyphs covering cliff faces. After an hour, they reached a wall covered in carvings, spirals, handprints, human figures with elongated limbs, and dominating the center, a massive bear with an almost human face surrounded by falling figures. Nyalnish stopped her fingers, tracing the air near the carving without touching. My grandmother said these were made by people who came before. Warnings of what happens when you feed the wrong spirits, when you break sacred rules because hunger makes you desperate. Luke studied the bear figure. How much payment is enough to break a curse? She turned to him. I do not know, but I think we are about to find out. By midday the temperature had climbed. Sweat soaked their shirts. They rested briefly in shade, giving the horse water. Nyalnish closed her eyes and listened. No birds, no insects, just wind through dry grass. Too quiet, she said. Luke nodded. He felt it too. We are close. The trail descended into a narrow canyon where walls rose 50 feet blocking the sun. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 20 yards. Luke stopped. Tracks in the hard earth. Nyalnish knelt beside him studying the prints. They were enormous, far larger than any natural bear. But the spacing was wrong. The paw pads barely pressed into the earth as if the creature weighed almost nothing despite its size. It was here recently, 2 days maybe, moving slowly. not hunting, waiting. Luke followed the tracks with his eyes. They led to a dark opening in the cliff face. A cave. He looked at Nyalnish. She nodded. The horse refused to go further, pulling back with whites showing around her eyes. Luke tied her to a juniper and checked his ammunition. 16 rounds. They approached the cave slowly, rifles ready. The opening was wide but low, forcing them to duck. Inside, the temperature dropped again. The walls were damp, covered in glowing moss that made the space feel alive. The smell hit them first. Rot and copper and acid that burned the throat. Death. Layers of death. Luke struck a match and lit his torch. The flame pushed back darkness. What they saw stopped their breath. Bones. Hundreds of them, scattered like seeds across the cave floor. Human and animal mixed together. Ribs, vertebrae, skulls, and among them smaller shapes. Children's bones. All cracked open, marrow sucked clean. This was not a lair. It was a tomb. Luke moved deeper, stepping carefully. His torch swept across the back wall and stopped. There, laid out with terrible care, was a small figure, a child in a brown wool shirt and dark pants. Key. The word barely made sound. Luke dropped to his knees beside the small skeleton. The flesh was gone, taken by scavengers and the dry mountain air over the course of months. Luke realized with sickening certainty that the tracks he had been following for weeks were never Key's footprints. They were the bear's, leading him here, always here. But the bones remained small and heartbreakingly whole. Clutched in the skeletal hand was a wooden horse, crude, one ear broken. Luke had carved it 2 years ago. He reached out with shaking hands. The toy crumbled at his touch, turning to dust that slipped through his fingers like water. Something inside Luke shattered. He bent forward and made a sound that was not quite sob, not quite scream, just raw pain with no words big enough to carry it. Nyalnish stood behind him, her hand lifting toward his shoulder, then stopping. She did not know how to comfort. No one had taught her, so she simply stood witness. After a long time, Luke's breathing steadied. He sat back, wiping his face with dusty hands. He was just a boy, just a scared boy trying to be brave. Nyalnish spoke quietly. He came here by choice. That is not your fault. I should have protected him, should have known. You cannot protect someone from their own decisions. You can only love them and hope it is enough. Sometimes it is not. Luke looked up at her. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It is supposed to be true. He almost laughed. Bitter, but real. Nyalnish moved past him, scanning the cave. She found a leather pouch near the body, partially buried. Inside was folded paper, old and brittle. She unfolded it carefully. The writing was Apache. Careful script. Luke stood unsteadily. What does it say? She read slowly, translating. My son, if you find this, know that I sent you away not to abandon you but to save you from the curse of our blood. The white bear is not a beast. It is our shame made flesh. Our tribe killed a sacred white buffalo calf in hunger. We were starving, children dying. The elders chose to kill the calf and feed its meat to the tribe. It saved us, but it cursed us. This is our punishment. Only when one of us offers themselves willingly with a pure heart will it end. I could not do it. I am too full of anger and bitterness. But maybe you can. You have your mother's heart, pure and brave. I am sorry I am giving you this burden, but I believe you are braver than I ever was. Your father, Tarak. The words hung heavy in the cold air. Luke's voice came broken. He sent Key to die, to sacrifice himself. Nyalnish nodded slowly. He sent Key to be brave, but Key was a child, and the bear did not accept him. Why not? She pointed to marks near the skull, scratches in stone. Not claw marks, but deliberate carvings, angry, jagged lines made by shaking hands, because his heart was not pure. Look at these marks. Key was furious, at his father for dying, at you for not being his real father, at himself for not being enough. That anger filled his heart. The bear sensed it, took him but did not accept the sacrifice. That is why it still hunts. Luke staggered back, finding the wall for support. Then what does it want? Naelnish worked through the pieces, fitting them together into a pattern she did not want to see. Not a warrior full of pride, not a child full of anger, someone who has nothing left to prove, someone whose heart is empty of resentment, someone who accepts death without fighting it. She paused. It wants me. Luke turned to her, eyes sharp despite grief. No. Yes. That is why the elders chose me. Not because I am cursed, because I have no anger left. I accepted death on that tree without question, without resentment. I was empty. That is what pure means. An absence of everything that makes you fight to keep living. Luke grabbed her arm. You are not doing this. You are not dying for people who left you tied to a tree. I am not doing it for them. I am doing it to end this, to make sure no other child ends up like Key. There has to be another way. She pulled her arm free gently. If there is, we have not found it. They stood surrounded by Bones' torchlight flickering across their faces. Luke wanted to argue, to find a solution that saved everyone. But deep in the part of him that had seen too much war, he knew she was right. Sometimes there was no clever answer. Sometimes the only way through was straight into the darkness. Finally he spoke. If you do this, I go with you. She shook her head. Your heart is not empty. It is full of guilt and love and grief. The bear will sense that and kill you. Then I die trying. At least I will be consistent in my failures. There was dark humor in his voice. Naelnish studied him, then smiled, small and sad and real. You are a stubborn fool, Luke Mercer. I know. Despite everything, she felt warmth in her chest. If she was going to die, at least she would not die alone. All right, we go together, but when the time comes, you let me do what needs to be done. Luke nodded slowly, agreed. They spent the next hour gathering Key's remains, with gentle hands wrapping the small bones in Luke's spare shirt. They would bury him properly, under sky and light. As they worked, Naelnish noticed a second passage at the back of the cave, narrow and hidden by fallen rock. Carved above it were the same symbols from outside. The bear with the human face. She touched the carving. The stone was cold, wrong cold. Then she felt it. A vibration, faint but regular, like a heartbeat. She pulled back. It is still here, deeper in the mountain, sleeping or waiting. Luke checked his rifle. Then we come back on our terms, when we are ready. Not now. They left the cave, stepping into sunlight that felt too bright after the darkness. They found a good spot half an hour's walk away. A rise with a single cottonwood soft ground, a view that went for miles. They dug together, taking turns with Luke's small spade. When the grave was deep enough, they lowered the bundle gently. Luke climbed down and positioned it with care, as if the boy might still feel discomfort. Then they filled it in, covered it with earth, then stones, a cairn that would last, that would mark this place. When finished, they stood on opposite sides. The sun was sinking, painting everything gold. Luke spoke to the stones. I am sorry I could not keep my promise. I am sorry I did not understand what your father asked of you. You deserved better. You deserved to grow up to become whoever you were meant to be. I hope you are at peace now. I hope you know I loved you as much as I knew how. It was not enough. But it was real. His throat closed. Naelnish waited, then added her own words. I did not know you, but I know what it is to feel split between two worlds that both reject you. If you died trying to bridge that gap, trying to be brave for both sides, then you were braver than most. Your death should not have been necessary. But since it was, I promise it will not be wasted. The thing that took you will not take anyone else. They stood in silence as stars emerged overhead. Luke finally turned away. We end this tomorrow night. Naelnish nodded. One way or another. They camped half a mile from the canyon, building a small fire. Luke made weak coffee. They shared dried meat, neither with much appetite. For a long time they sat without speaking. The fire crackled. A coyote called in the distance. Luke cleaned his rifle again. Naelnish sharpened her knife. Finally, as the fire burned to coals, Naelnish spoke. I need to tell you why I agreed to the sacrifice so easily." Luke looked up. She stared into the embers. "When I was small, I used to dream I was normal, small enough to fit in my mother's lap, light enough for my father to carry. I dreamed children would play with me instead of throwing rocks, that my mother would look at me with love instead of sadness. I dreamed of being invisible in the best way." She paused. "As I grew and it became clear small would never describe me, the dream changed. I dreamed of being useful, that my strength mattered. People did need those things, but needing and wanting are different. They needed my strength but wanted me gone. After enough years, you start to believe being useful is the only love you deserve." She looked at Luke. "When the elders said I could save the tribe by dying, part of me was relieved. Finally, I would matter cleanly, no complications. In death, I could be purely useful. That felt better than living my whole life wondering if anyone would miss me if I just walked away and never came back." Luke set down the rifle. "I would miss you." She blinked, surprised. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are brave enough to stand before a monster. I know you are kind enough to forgive people who tried to kill you. I know you are strong in ways that have nothing to do with how much you can lift. Those are not small things." He leaned forward. "You matter. Not because you are useful, because you are you. You are the first person in years who understands what it means to carry something you did not ask for. That is rare. That matters." Nalnish sat very still, absorbing his words like rain on dry earth. No one had ever said anything like this to her. Finally, her voice rough, she spoke. "If we survive this, I would like to stay. With you. Not because I owe you, but because being around you makes me feel like maybe I could be a person instead of just a problem." Luke felt something in his chest loosen. "I would like that too." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Luke stood. "We should rest. Tomorrow will be hard." Nalnish nodded but did not lie down. "Luke, if something goes wrong, if the bear does not accept my sacrifice, you need to run. Do not try to save me." He looked at her. "I am not good at running from people I care about. I am better at staying until the end, even when it is stupid." She almost smiled. "That is what I thought you would say." He settled into his bedroll. Nalnish lay down on the other side. Before sleep took her, she spoke into darkness. "Thank you for seeing me." Luke's response came quiet but firm. "Thank you for letting me." They slept fitfully, waking at small sounds. The night passed slowly, marked by wheeling stars. Somewhere in the canyon something waited. When dawn came pale and cold, they were already awake. They spent the morning on final preparations, checking weapons, counting ammunition, filling canteens. Around midday, as they ate a sparse meal, Nalnish asked the question circling her mind. "What happens if the sacrifice works and the curse ends? What happens to you?" Luke chewed slowly. "I go back to my cabin. I keep living. Maybe I plant a garden. I have meant to for years, but it felt pointless when you are not sure you want to be around to see things grow. But maybe now I would. Maybe I would plant corn and beans and squash and tend them and think about how you were braver than anyone I ever met." Nalnish felt her throat tighten. "I wish I could see that garden." "Maybe you will. Maybe the bear takes the sacrifice, but not your life. Maybe there is a way through we have not thought of." She wanted to believe that, but she had learned not to hope for miracles. Still, she nodded. "Maybe." As the sun descended, they packed up and began walking back toward the canyon. They moved slowly, neither hurrying. The light turned gold, then orange, then red. Shadows stretched long across the land. When they reached the clearing near the cave, they stopped. Nalnish set down her rifle and pack. She checked the knife at her belt, then looked at Luke. "This is it. Whatever happens, I want you to know these last days were worth it. Feeling like someone saw me as a person instead of a thing. That was worth whatever comes next." Luke stepped close. He had to look up to meet her eyes. He took her hand, his rough and scarred and warm, hers larger, stronger, equally scarred. "I see you, Nalnish. I will keep seeing you, whatever happens." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. "Then let us finish this." They walked toward the cave together. The opening yawned dark and waiting. They stepped inside. The smell was the same. But now there was something else. A sense of presence, of attention focused on them. They did not need a torch. Light came from deeper in, a faint white glow pulsing like a heartbeat made visible. They followed it down the narrow passage, into the mountain's depths where stone pressed close and air grew thin. The passage opened into a large chamber, and in the center, standing in white light with no source, was the bear. It filled the chamber not with size alone, but with presence. The white light seemed to emanate from within it, pulsing with each breath. Where before it had been flesh and fur, now it was something more, translucent, edges blurring into mist. Only the eyes remained solid, white and depthless and impossibly old. Beside the bear flickered the ghost of Key. The boy looked at Luke with eyes too old. The ghost spoke with a voice that was and was not Key's. "You came. I knew you would. You cannot help yourself. You think saving enough people will make up for those you could not save. But guilt is not a debt you can pay off. It is a stone you carry until it breaks you, or you learn to set it down." Luke's hands shook, but his voice stayed steady. "I know you are not him. I know you are using his face to hurt me. But it does not matter. I loved him. I failed him. I will carry that until I die." The ghost smiled sadly. "Then you will carry it a very long time, because you are very good at surviving." Nyalnish stepped forward between Luke and the apparition. "Enough. I am here. I offer myself willingly. My heart holds no anger, no resentment. I accept what comes. Take me and end this." The bear dropped to all fours and moved toward her, slowly, each step deliberate. It stopped 5 feet away and lowered its head, sniffing. Breath came in white mist that smelled like winter and graves. Nyalnish stood still, eyes open. The bear circled her once, twice, stopped and looked at her with terrible white eyes, and turned away. Nyalnish froze, confused. The bear looked back, and somehow without words she understood. "You do not offer yourself for love. You offer yourself to escape. You want to die because dying is easier than learning to live. That is not sacrifice. That is surrender. I do not accept." The bear's gaze shifted to Luke and charged, not at Nyalnish, at Luke. Luke fired. The rifle thundered. The bullet struck the bear's shoulder. Light, not blood, leaked out. The bear did not slow. It crashed into Luke, sending him sprawling. The rifle clattered away. The bear pinned him with one massive paw. Nyalnish moved without thought, pure instinct. She threw herself at the bare hands, closing around its neck, all her cursed strength brought against this thing. But her hands sank into fur like mist, like smoke, like nothing. The bear shook her off casually. She flew backward, crashed into the wall, felt ribs crack. Pain bright and sharp. The bear stood over Luke, paw raised to end it. And Nyalnish understood. The bear wanted Luke because his heart was full of love and guilt and the need to save people. Not empty, overflowing, the perfect meal, but also worth saving. She screamed raw and primal, full of every emotion buried for 28 years. "Not him. If you want a heart that bleeds, take mine. But not because I am empty, because I am full of anger at being treated like a curse, full of love for the one person who saw me as human, full of fear. I will lose him before I understand what that means. Take me because I choose this, because saving him matters more than saving myself. Because for the first time in my life I want to live, and I am giving that up for him. That is sacrifice, not emptiness. Choice." She staggered forward, broken ribs screaming, and placed her hand on the bear's head. "I see you. You are not a monster. You are pain never healed, rage never acknowledged, a debt no one wanted to pay, so it grew until it became this. I see you. I understand. I am sorry. Sorry your death mattered so little people forgot why you were sacred. Sorry hunger made them cruel. Sorry you carried this alone so long." The bear's eyes locked with hers. Something changed. White light grew brighter, warmer. The bear's form shimmered, dissolving like morning mist. Naelnish felt warmth spread from her hand into the bear, from the bear into her. Connection. Understanding. Recognition between two beings alone too long. The bear's voice came not as words, but feeling. Gratitude. Release. Peace. Then it was gone. The light faded. Darkness lit only by Luke's fallen torch. Naelnish collapsed to her knees, exhausted, in pain, alive. Luke groaned and sat up, clutching his ribs. She knelt beside him. Lying where the bear stood was a single white claw larger than her hand. She picked it up. Warm. Almost alive. What happened? She looked at the claw. It is over. The curse is broken. Oh, she met his eyes. I finally understood. It was never about dying empty. It was about being full and choosing to give that up for someone else. About connection. About seeing another's pain and saying, I will help carry this. That breaks curses. Not sacrifice. Love. Luke stared at the empty space. Then Key died for nothing. No. Key died trying to be brave before he was ready. His heart was full of anger. Mine was full of love. That made the difference. From the entrance footsteps, multiple sets. Elder Naki emerged, leaning on his staff. Behind him 3 other elders, faces streaked with tears. Naki approached and knelt before Naelnish, old knees cracking, head bowed. Forgive us. Forgive me. We were afraid. We chose cruelty because it felt like strength. You saved us not by dying but by choosing to live, by teaching us what sacrifice truly means. Naelnish looked down at him. She could hate him, but hate was weight she no longer wanted to carry. I forgive you, but I will not forget. I will not come back to be what you need me to be. I will come back to show you who I choose to be. There is a difference. Naki nodded. That is all we can ask. He stood and walked away, the others following. Luke helped Naelnish to her feet. Both winced, both injured, both alive. What now? She looked toward the entrance where dawn light was beginning to show. Now I go back, to my people, not because they need me, but because I need to face them as someone who chose her own path. Luke's face fell. You are leaving, not forever, but for now. I need to do this for myself. Will you come back? She smiled, reaching her eyes. Yes, when I am ready. How long? As long as it takes. Luke nodded slowly. Then I will wait. I will plant that garden. When you come back, something will be growing. She leaned down and kissed his forehead gently. Then I will try not to make you wait too long. They walked out together into dawn. The sun rose over mountains, painting everything gold and red. The world looked new, washed clean. The bear was gone. The curse broken. But the real work, learning to live without fear, was just beginning. And for the first time in their lives, neither faced it alone. 2 weeks had passed since the white bear dissolved into light and left only a claw behind. 2 weeks since Naelnish had stood in that cave and chosen life over the easier path of death. 2 weeks since she had kissed Luke's forehead and walked away toward a reckoning she knew would be harder than facing any monster. She had not gone back to the Apache camp immediately. Instead, she had spent 3 days alone in the high country, sitting on flat rocks overlooking valleys that stretched to the horizon, thinking about who she had been and who she wanted to become. The white claw hung around her neck on a leather cord she had braided herself, warm against her skin, even in the cold mountain air. At night she built small fires and talked to herself, practicing the words she would say when she returned, rehearsing the speech that would either change everything or confirm that she had never truly belonged. On the morning of the 4th day, she woke to find frost covering the ground like scattered diamonds. She watched the sun rise and burn it away, watched the world transform from one thing into another, with nothing but light and time. It felt like a sign. Or maybe she was just looking for signs because the alternative was accepting that she was walking into the unknown with nothing but hope to guide her. She broke camp slowly, methodically, the way her father had taught her. Left no trace. Took only what belonged to her. When she was finished, she stood for a moment looking at the valley below, gathering her courage like a woman gathering kindling for a fire that needed to burn hot and long. Then she began walking. She reached the Apache camp at midday when the sun was high and merciless and there was nowhere to hide. She had planned it that way. No approaching under cover of darkness, no trying to slip in unnoticed. She walked down the main path into the center of camp with her back straight and her head up and the bear claw visible against her chest. The effect was immediate and profound. A woman carrying water stopped mid-step, the jug tilting in her hands, liquid spilling into the dust at her feet unnoticed. A man sharpening a blade looked up and the whetstone tumbled from his lap. Children playing a game with painted stones fell silent, their small faces turning toward her with eyes wide and uncertain. An old man who had been weaving a basket simply stared, his gnarled hands frozen in mid-motion. Naalnish kept walking. She did not lower her eyes, did not hunch her shoulders to make herself seem smaller, less threatening, more acceptable. She walked through the center of camp like she had every right to be there because she did. She was Apache. This was her home. Even if they had tried to kill her, even if some of them still wished she had died on that tree. Elder Naki emerged from his shelter, moving slowly, leaning heavily on his walking staff. He looked older than when she had last seen him. The flesh had melted from his bones. His skin had taken on a gray pallor that spoke of sickness eating him from the inside. But his eyes were still sharp, still clear, still capable of seeing into the heart of things. He raised one trembling hand. The gesture cut through the growing murmur of voices like a knife through cloth. She has returned. The one who broke the curse. The one who chose life when we offered her only death. His voice carried across the camp stronger than his frail body suggested it should be able to produce. Naalnish stopped in the exact center of the common area, equidistant from all the shelters visible to everyone. She turned slowly, deliberately, letting every person see her face, letting them see the bruises still yellowing on her cheekbones, letting them see the way she favored her left side where ribs were still knitting back together, letting them see the white bear claw that caught the sunlight and threw it back in brilliant flashes. "I came back," she said, her voice steady and clear and loud enough to reach the farthest ears. "Not because you asked me to. Not because I have forgiven everything that was done to me. I came back because I am done hiding from who I am. I am done pretending to be smaller, quieter, less than what I am, so that you can feel comfortable around me." She paused, letting the words settle like dust after a windstorm. "I am Apache. I am a woman. I am tall and I am strong and I am different from you, and those things do not make me cursed. They make me who I am. I will not apologize for existing. Not anymore. Not ever again. If that makes you uncomfortable, if that frightens you, that is your burden to carry. Not mine. I am done carrying your fear." The silence that followed was so complete that Naalnish could hear the wind moving through the grass at the edge of camp, could hear a baby fussing in one of the distant shelters, could hear her own heart beating steady and strong in her chest. Then a man stepped forward from the crowd. Not young, but not yet old. His face was a landscape of scars, each one a story of survival. Chato, the warrior who had come to fetch her that night, who had led her to the tree knowing what waited there. "You killed the skinwalker," he said. His voice was careful, neutral, giving nothing away. "The white bear that has haunted us for 20 years, taken our children, our elders, our hunters. How did you do it?" Naalnish met his gaze without flinching. "I did not kill it. I freed it. There is a difference. The bear was never our enemy. It was our pain given form, our shame made flesh. It existed because 20 years ago our tribe killed a sacred white buffalo calf. We were starving. Children were dying. The elders made a choice. They killed the calf and fed its meat to the people, and that meat saved us. But it also cursed us. The bear was that curse. It would not end until someone paid the debt with a pure heart. She touched the claw at her throat. The bear did not want someone who was empty. It wanted someone who was full of love and fear and all the messy, complicated things that make us human. It wanted someone who chose to sacrifice not because they had nothing to live for, but because they had everything to live for and gave it up anyway. That is what broke the curse. Not death. Choice. An old woman pushed through the crowd with the determination of someone who has lived long enough not to care about propriety anymore. Naalnish recognized her. Ishta. 3 years ago, the bear had taken her daughter, a child of 7 who had been playing near the stream one moment and gone the next. They had found only her doll torn and covered in blood. Ishta's face was carved with grief so deep it had become part of her bone structure. "My daughter died," she said, and her voice cracked like dry wood under pressure. "My Kaya was 7 years old. She had a laugh like water over stones. She was learning to weave. She was going to be married someday and give me grandchildren. The bear took her in the night and we found only her doll, and I have carried that doll every day since because it is all I have left of her." Ishta's eyes were dry but fierce. "You say the bear was our pain. You say you freed it. But my daughter is still dead. Your sacrifice does not bring her back to me. How does any of this give her back?" The question hit Naalnish like a physical blow. She had known this question would come, had spent those 3 days in the high country preparing for it, but preparation did not make truth easier to speak or to hear. "It does not," Naalnish said quietly. "Nothing I did brings back those who were lost. Your daughter is gone, and that is a grief you will carry every day until you join her in the next world. I cannot fix that. No one can. All the sacrifice in the world cannot turn back time or undo what has been done." She took a step toward Ishta, closing the distance between them. "But I can make sure no other mother has to find her child's doll covered in blood and nothing else. I can make sure the debt is finally paid and the dying stops. I can make sure Kaya was the last. That is all I can offer you. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But it is something. It is more than we had before." Ishta stared at her for a long moment. Tears tracked down her weathered face, cutting paths through dust and age. Then slowly, the old woman nodded. "It is something," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is more than we had yesterday. It is more than I thought I would ever have. Thank you for that much at least." She turned and walked back into the crowd, moving like a woman who had set down a weight she had been carrying so long she had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Another voice called out. A younger man, perhaps 25, with anger sharp in his face. "The elders tied you to a tree to die. They left you there like you were nothing, like your life meant less than ours, like you were a thing to be used and thrown away. Why come back? Why not stay gone and let us drown in our shame?" Naalnish turned to face him. "Because staying away would mean you won. It would mean I believed what you believed about me, that I was cursed, that I was less than human, that I deserved to be used and discarded like a broken tool. I refuse to believe that. I am done believing that. I am done letting your fear and your hatred tell me who I am." She raised her voice so that everyone could hear, so that her words would reach into every shelter and every heart. "I am Apache. That is not something you can take from me no matter how hard you try. I was born Apache, and I will die Apache, and everything in between belongs to me. My life, my choices, my place in this tribe. I will not apologize for existing. I will not make myself small so you can feel big. I will not hide so you can feel comfortable. I am done with all of that." She paused, her eyes moving across the faces in the crowd. "If that makes you uncomfortable, if you cannot accept me as I am, then that is your failure, not mine. I am offering you a chance to be better than you were, to learn from what happened, to choose differently going forward. But I will not beg for that chance. I will not plead for acceptance. Either you take this opportunity or you do not. Either way, I know who I am now, and that is enough." The silence that followed was different this time, thicker, weighted with possibility. Elder Naki struck his staff against the ground 3 times. The sharp crack cut through the quiet like lightning through storm clouds. "She speaks truth," he said, his voice carrying the authority of age and position. Hard truth. The kind of truth we have been avoiding for 20 years. We made her into the thing we feared because we did not want to face our own failures. We offered her as sacrifice because it was easier than sacrificing our own comfort, our own pride, our own certainty that we knew the right way. He looked directly at Nalnish, and something in his face softened. "You owe us nothing. You have every right to turn your back on this tribe and never look back. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to remain part of us, despite everything we have done, we will listen. We will learn. We will try to be worthy of the second chance you are offering us." Nalnish studied the old man's face and saw genuine remorse there, genuine desire to change. She also saw the fear still lurking in some eyes in the crowd, the suspicion that would not evaporate with one speech or one act of courage. Change would be slow. Change would be painful. Change might not even be possible for some people, but change was at least possible now. That was more than she had dared hope for. "I will stay," she said finally, "but not the way I stayed before. I will speak when I have something to say. I will take up the space I need without apologizing for it. I will live as myself fully and completely without making myself smaller for your comfort. If you can accept that, then I am still Apache, still part of this tribe, still willing to contribute and to belong. If you cannot accept that, then I will leave and you will lose someone who could have made you stronger. The choice is yours to make." Naki bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. "That is fair. That is more than fair. That is generous beyond what we deserve." He turned to address the crowd. "We are dismissed. Think carefully on what you have heard. Tomorrow we will gather again and discuss how we move forward, how we change, how we become the people we should have been all along. But for now, give her space. Give her respect. She has earned more than we can ever repay." The crowd began to disperse slowly, reluctantly people casting glances back at Nalnish as they moved toward their daily tasks. Some of those glances held fear. Some held curiosity. A very few held something that looked like admiration or respect, or at least the beginning of understanding. As the common area cleared, a small figure detached itself from the shadows near one of the shelters. A child, no more than 5 years old. A girl with wide dark eyes and hair braided with small beads that clicked together when she moved. She walked toward Naalnish with the fearlessness that only very young children possess, children who have not yet learned what they are supposed to be afraid of. The girl stopped directly in front of Naalnish and tilted her head all the way back to look up at the tall woman towering above her like a mountain. "Are you the giant who killed the monster?" Naalnish knelt down slowly, carefully bringing herself closer to the child's level, though even kneeling she was still taller than most grown men. "No," she said gently. "I am the giant who let the monster go." There is a difference. The girl considered this with the intense seriousness that children bring to questions adults often dismiss. "Why did you let it go instead of killing it?" "Because it was not really a monster. It was something in terrible pain that did not know how to heal. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to fight, but to understand. To see the pain in another being and try to help instead of hurt." The girl nodded slowly as if this made perfect sense to her. "I am Outse. My name means first. I am the first daughter of my mother, and she says I ask too many questions." Naalnish smiled, and it was a real smile reaching her eyes. "I am Naalnish. My name means she who works. And I do not think there is such a thing as too many questions. Questions are how we learn, how we grow." The girl reached out with one small hand and touched the white bear claw hanging around Naalnish's neck. Her fingers traced the smooth surface with wonder and delight. "It is beautiful. Did the monster give it to you in a way? It is a reminder of what happened, of what I learned, of who I am now." What did you learn? Naalnish thought about that question. Thought about all the complicated truths she had discovered in that cave. About sacrifice and love and choosing life even when death felt easier. I learned that being strong is not about never being afraid. It is about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. I learned that being different is not a curse. It is just being different. And I learned that the only person who gets to decide who I am is me, not anyone else, just me. Outsay smiled, bright and uncomplicated. I think you are very wise. Then she turned and ran back toward her mother, who stood watching from a distance with an expression that held both caution and something that might have been hope. Nyalnish stood slowly, her ribs protesting the movement. She was exhausted, bone-deep tired from the weight of confrontation, from holding herself together through sheer force of will, from speaking truths that needed to be spoken even though they cut like knives on the way out. But she had done it. She had come back. She had spoken her truth. She had not been destroyed. It was a beginning. That was all. Just a beginning. But beginnings mattered. Beginnings were where everything else grew from. She walked to the edge of camp and sat down beneath a cottonwood tree, letting its shade cool her heated skin. She needed to rest, to think, to process everything that had just happened. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more conversations, more opportunities to fail or succeed. But tomorrow could wait. For now, she had survived today. And that was enough. She spent that evening alone on a rise overlooking the valley, watching the sun set in shades of orange and red and purple that looked like fire spreading across the sky. She had built a small fire and sat close to its warmth, thinking about Luke, wondering what he was doing at his cabin 2 days' walk to the south, wondering if he was looking at the same sunset, wondering if he was thinking about her the way she was thinking about him. She had told him she would come back when she was ready. But what did ready mean? Was it when the tribe fully accepted her? That might take years, might take decades, might never happen completely. Or was ready something simpler? Was it just when she felt strong enough to face whatever came next, when she had proven to herself that she could exist in this space without breaking? She was pondering this question when she heard footsteps approaching. Careful footsteps, announcing their presence so they would not startle her. She turned to see Chatto emerging from the gathering darkness, his hands held out from his sides to show he was unarmed, that he came in peace. "May I sit?" She gestured to a spot across the fire from her. He settled down with the easy grace of a man who had spent his entire life outdoors, comfortable in his body, in a way Nyalnish had never been allowed to be. For a long time they sat in silence, watching the fire burn down, watching the stars emerge one by one overhead. Then Chatto spoke. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not just words but truth." He paused, gathering courage. "I came to fetch you that night. I knew what the elders were planning. I knew they were going to tie you to that tree and leave you for the bear. I told myself I was just following orders, that the elders knew best, that it was necessary to save the tribe. But those were lies I told myself because the truth was harder. What was the truth? That I was afraid. That we all were. The bear had taken my sister's son the year before, a boy of 8 named Tahoe, who used to follow me around asking to learn how to shoot a bow. One morning we woke up and he was gone, and we never found anything but his blanket torn to pieces." Chatto's voice roughened. "The elders said sacrifice was the only way. And you were the easy choice. The one person in the tribe who had no one to speak for them, no one to fight for them, no family who would cause trouble. I am deeply ashamed of that now. But it is the truth. We chose cruelty because it was easy, because we were afraid, because you were different, and that made you expendable in our eyes." Nyalnish listened without interrupting, letting him speak his truth the way he had let her speak hers. "I cannot undo what was done. I cannot take back leading you to that tree. But I can promise that I will never be that coward again. I can promise that from now on, when I see injustice, I will speak against it, even when it is hard, even when it is dangerous, even when everyone else is silent." He met her eyes across the fire. "What you said today about not apologizing for existing, about taking up space without making yourself smaller. I needed to hear that too. We all did. We have been making ourselves smaller for the white men, for the government, for everyone who tells us we do not belong on the land our ancestors walked for 1,000 generations. Maybe if we had your courage, we would not have to keep shrinking. Maybe we could stand tall again." Nyalnish felt the weight of his words, the unexpected connection between her personal struggle and the tribe's collective struggle. She had not thought about it that way before, had not considered that her refusal to be diminished might be a lesson others needed. "Courage is easier when you have nothing left to lose," she said quietly. "I had already lost everything that mattered. My father, my mother's love, any hope of belonging. When you are that alone, speaking truth costs nothing because there is nothing left they can take. But you had something to lose. Chatto insisted. Your life. You could have run after Luke cut you down, could have walked away and never looked back. But you came back. You faced us. You gave us a chance to be better, even though we did not deserve it. That is courage. That is strength I want to learn." They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Chatto stood. "If you stay, if you remain with the tribe, I will stand with you. When others whisper behind their hands, when they show fear or suspicion, I will speak against it. It is small, it is not nearly enough, but it is what I can offer." Nyalnish looked up at him, seeing genuine determination in his scarred face. "Why? What makes you willing to stand with me when it would be easier to stay silent, because I saw what real strength looks like in that cave. And it was not what I thought. I thought strength was the ability to dominate, to control, to take. But you showed me that strength is the ability to endure, to choose life when death would be easier, to forgive when hatred would be simpler, to stand tall when the world wants you small. That is the kind of strength I want to cultivate in myself." He nodded once, formal and respectful, then turned and walked back toward camp, his footsteps fading into the darkness. Nyalnish sat alone again, staring into the fire, feeling something shift inside her chest, something that felt like hope, but also like responsibility. She had thought she was just fighting for herself, for her own right to exist, but maybe it was bigger than that. Maybe her fight was connected to something larger, to everyone who had ever been told they were too much or not enough or wrong in some fundamental way. Maybe standing up for herself was also standing up for all of them. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning brought more visitors, people who wanted to see the bear claw up close, to hear the full story of what happened in the cave, to ask questions about the white bear and the curse and how it finally ended. Nyalnish told the story over and over, each telling, taking something out of her but also giving something back. She saw people's faces change as they listened, saw fear slowly replaced by curiosity, saw suspicion softened by understanding. Not everyone changed. There were still people who crossed to the other side of camp when they saw her coming, still people who would not meet her eyes, still whispers that stopped abruptly when she came within earshot. But there were also small shifts. A woman who had always avoided her now nodded in greeting when their paths crossed. A man who had thrown a rock at her when she was a child offered her water from his own canteen without being asked. A group of children, including Outsay, began following her around the camp at a respectful distance, whispering among themselves and giggling when she turned to look at them. It was not acceptance. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something that might become acceptance given time and patience and continued effort. On the third day after her return, Elder Naki summoned her to his shelter. She ducked through the low entrance, her height forcing her to bend almost double, and found him sitting on woven mats with a small fire burning in the center of the space. He looked worse than he had 3 days ago. The sickness was eating him faster now, consuming him from the inside. She could see it in the hollows of his cheeks, the yellowing of his eyes, the way his hands trembled even when resting in his lap. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the mats across from him. She sat folding her long legs beneath her. "I am dying," he said without preamble. "The coughing sickness. I have perhaps 1 season left, maybe 2 if the spirits are cruel and want me to suffer longer." Nyalnish had suspected this, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way suspicion never did. I am sorry. He waved this away with one trembling hand. Do not be sorry. We all die. The only question that matters is what we leave behind. I want to leave something better than shame and fear. I want to leave a tribe that remembers how to be brave, how to be kind, how to choose difficult right over easy wrong. He paused, his breath wheezing in his chest. You can teach them that. You already are teaching them that. Just by existing, just by refusing to be what we tried to make you. That is the most powerful lesson anyone can give. I am not a teacher. I do not know how to be. You do not need to know. You just need to be. To exist fully and honestly and without apology. The rest will follow. He reached into a bundle beside him and pulled out something wrapped in soft doeskin leather. He unfolded it with careful reverence, his gnarled fingers struggling with the task. Inside was a rifle. The Springfield. Her father's rifle. The one her cousin Daklugi had stolen the day after her father's burial. Nalnish's breath caught in her throat. Her hands reached out involuntarily, then stopped, hovering in the air as if afraid the rifle might disappear if she touched it. How I took it from Daklugi 3 days ago. Summoned him to my shelter and demanded he return what he stole. He refused at first. Said he had more right to it than you did. Said your father would have wanted a warrior to carry it, not a cursed woman. Naki's eyes glittered with anger at the memory. I told him he had 2 choices. Return the rifle and apologize to you in front of the entire tribe. Or leave. Be banished. Cast out. No longer Apache. What did he choose? He chose to leave. Said he would rather live anywhere else than in a tribe led by cowards and cursed women. His words, not mine. He left that same day, took his horse and his weapons and rode north. I do not think he will return. Naki held out the rifle. This is yours. It was always yours. Your father wanted you to have it. I am sorry it took so long. I am sorry for many things. But this at least I can make right before I die. Nalnish took the rifle with trembling hands. The weight of it was exactly as she remembered. The wood stock was smooth from years of use, worn in the exact places where her father's hands had gripped it. She could almost feel his presence in the weapon, almost hear his voice telling her to hold it steady, to breathe before the shot, to respect the power she held. Tears tracked down her face. She did not bother to hide them. Thank you. This means more than I can say. There is one more thing, Naki said. The tribe needs to choose a new war chief, someone to lead our warriors if we are attacked, someone to make hard decisions in dangerous times. I am recommending you for the position. Nalnish stared at him, certain she had misheard. Me? They would never accept me as war chief. Half of them are still afraid of me. Fear can become respect if given the proper foundation, and you have proven yourself in the only way that truly matters. You faced death and chose life. You faced hatred and chose forgiveness. You faced an impossible situation and found a way through it. Those are the qualities a leader needs. But I am a woman. There has never been a female war chief. There has never been someone who defeated the white bear either. Until you. Tradition is important, but survival is more important. And I believe you give us the best chance at survival. I do not want to lead. I do not know how. Naki smiled, and despite the pain and sickness ravaging his body, the smile was genuine. That is precisely why you should. People who want power are the most dangerous ones to give it to. They use it to make themselves bigger. People who take it reluctantly, who understand its weight, who fear its potential for harm, those are the ones who use it wisely. Nalnish sat holding the rifle, feeling the weight of 2 burdens now instead of 1. I need time to think about this. Take all the time you need. I will not bring it before the council until you give me permission. But think carefully. The tribe needs you, not because you are cursed or because you are different, because you are brave and honest and strong in all the ways that matter. She stood slowly, cradling the rifle like it was made of glass. Why are you doing this? Really? Because I failed you once? Because I let fear guide me when wisdom should have? Because I want to die knowing I did at least one thing right in all my years as elder? Let me give you this. Let me help you claim the place that should have been yours all along." Naelnish nodded, too overcome to speak. She left the shelter and stepped back into sunlight that seemed brighter somehow, more full of possibility. She spent the rest of that day alone with the rifle, cleaning it the way her father had taught her, taking it apart piece by piece, oiling each component, putting it back together. The work was meditative, calming. Her hands remembered the process even though her conscious mind had tried to forget. As she worked, she thought about what Naki had said, about leadership, about responsibility, about using power wisely rather than well. Could she do it? Could she lead warriors who had once wanted her dead? Could she make decisions that would affect the whole tribe? She did not know, but maybe not knowing was the point. Maybe certainty was what made leaders dangerous. Maybe doubt was what kept them humble. She was still thinking about this when she heard a commotion from the main camp. Voices raised not in anger but in surprise, in confusion, in something that sounded almost like excitement. She stood rifle in hand and walked toward the noise. A crowd had gathered near the camp entrance. People were pointing, talking over each other in a cacophony of voices. Naelnish pushed through, using her height to see over their heads, and stopped. There, standing at the edge of camp, looking uncertain and out of place and utterly determined, was Luke. He held his horse's reins in one hand and his hat in the other. His hair was dusty from travel. His clothes showed the wear of hard riding, but his eyes, when they found hers across the distance, were steady. Their gazes locked, held. Something passed between them that needed no words. Naelnish walked toward him, the crowd parting to let her through. When she reached him, they stood facing each other in silence. She could see the question in his face, the worry that he had overstepped, that he was not welcome here. She answered without words, reaching out to take his free hand in hers. "You came." Luke's lips quirked in a small smile. "I said I would wait for you. I did not say I would wait quietly in one place doing nothing." He gestured to the pack strapped to his horse. "I brought seeds, corn, beans, squash, pumpkin. Thought maybe we could plant them. Here, together, if you want. If they," he nodded toward the watching crowd, "will have me." Naelnish felt something warm bloom in her chest, something that felt like joy but also like relief, but also like hope for a future she had not dared to imagine. "You rode for 2 days to bring me seeds. I rode for 2 days because I missed you and because I am terrible at waiting and because I wanted to see if what we started in those few days could grow into something more given time and patience and proper care." He met her eyes. "Also because I love you, and I thought you should know that before any more time passed and before I lost my nerve to say it." The watching crowd went very quiet. Naelnish was aware of dozens of eyes on them, aware that what happened next would be remembered, would be talked about, would become part of the story people told. She did not care. She leaned down and kissed him. Right there in front of everyone. A kiss that was both answer and question and promise all at once. When she pulled back, Luke's eyes were bright. "I will take that as a yes." She laughed. Actually, laughed. The sound was loud and uninhibited and free in a way she had never allowed herself to be. "Yes. Stay. Plant seeds. See what grows." Elder Naki stepped forward from the crowd, his expression unreadable. "The white man wishes to stay among us." Luke turned to face him, respectful but not servile. "I do. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through, as someone willing to work, to contribute, to learn your ways and honor your customs. I have skills. I can hunt and track and build and repair. I ask only for a chance to prove I can be useful, and to be near her." He nodded toward Naelnish. "Because she makes me want to be better than I have been, and I have been alone long enough." Naki studied Luke with the intensity of a man trying to see past surface to truth beneath. "What do you think?" he asked Naelnish. "You have earned the right to speak on this." Naelnish felt the weight of the moment. This was a test, not just for Luke but for her, for the tribe. Could they accept an outsider the way she was asking them to accept her? She took a breath and spoke clearly. He saved my life. He saw me as human when my own people saw me as sacrifice. He has proven himself to me in every way that matters. If the tribe cannot accept him, if you cannot make space for someone who is different, then I question whether this is truly my home, whether you have learned anything at all from what happened." The silence was profound. Then Chato stepped forward. "I stand with Nalnish. If she vouches for him, that is enough for me. Let him prove himself through his actions. That is the Apache way." Another voice from the crowd. "The mother of young Outse. He brought seeds to help us grow food. That is a gift freely given. I say let him stay. Let him plant. Let him prove his worth through what he grows." More voices joined in. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Enough to tip the balance. Naki nodded slowly. "Then it is decided. You may stay, Luke Mercer. Prove yourself worthy of the trust Nalnish places in you." Luke bowed his head respectfully. "I will do everything in my power to honor that trust." The crowd began to disperse, though many cast curious glances back at them. When they were relatively alone, Luke stepped closer to Nalnish. "I was not sure you would want me here. Thought maybe I was being selfish, inserting myself where I was not needed." Nalnish squeezed his hand. "I was going to come back to you, soon, maybe in another week or two. But this is better, having you here. I do not want to keep choosing between two halves of my life. I want it all in one place, you and my people and my home all together. Then that is what we will build, all of it, together." The following weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient at the same time. Luke and Naalnish worked side by side preparing ground for planting. The earth was hard-baked by years of sun and starved of water. They broke it with picks and hoes, cleared rocks that seemed to multiply overnight, mixed in what little organic matter they could scavenge from the edges of camp. It was brutal work, the kind that left muscles screaming and hands bleeding and backs bent with exhaustion. But it was also good work, honest work, the kind where you could see progress measured in turned earth and cleared ground. They worked mostly in comfortable silence, the way people do when they have moved past the need to fill every moment with words. Sometimes Luke would tell stories about places he had scouted, about mountains that touched the sky and rivers so wide you could not see the other side. Naalnish would counter with stories her father had told her, about the old days before the white men came in numbers too great to count, about how the land used to be when the Apache could move freely across it, following the seasons and the game. They did not talk much about the future. It felt too fragile, too uncertain, like speaking it out loud might break whatever spell was allowing this to work. But they built it anyway. One seed planted, one fence post set, one meal shared around a small fire while the stars wheeled overhead. The tribe watched them with cautious interest that slowly, incrementally shifted toward something warmer. Luke was quiet and respectful and willing to work without complaint. He fixed broken tools with clever hands, helped repair shelters damaged by winter storms, taught children how to tie knots that would hold under pressure. Some people began to warm to him, began to greet him in passing, began to ask his advice on small matters. Others remained suspicious. Naalnish heard the whispers, saw the way certain people turned away when she and Luke walked past together, felt the weight of disapproval from those who believed tradition mattered more than connection. But whispers were just whispers. They could not actually harm her. Not anymore. She had faced worse than disapproval and survived. What mattered was that change was happening, slowly, imperfectly, but happening nonetheless. One evening about a month after Luke's arrival, they sat together on their usual rise overlooking the valley. The sun was setting in its nightly spectacle of color. Between them sat a basket containing small green shoots, the first visible evidence that their planted seeds were growing. Luke picked up one of the delicate stems, examining it with the careful attention he gave to everything. "They are growing faster than I expected," Naalnish smiled. "Good soil, good water, good hands tending them. Maybe we are lucky. Maybe luck has nothing to do with it. Maybe we are just finally doing something right." He set the shoot down carefully and turned to look at her. The fading light painted his face in shades of gold and amber. I have been thinking about what happens next, after the harvest, after we prove this can work. What do you want to happen? He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I want to build something permanent, not just a garden, a life. Here with your people or back at my cabin or somewhere new entirely. I want to wake up knowing I am not just surviving anymore, that I am actually living, with you, building something that matters, if that is what you want too. Nalnish felt her throat tighten with emotion. I want that. But I need you to understand something. I am not easy to love. I do not know how to be. I have spent 28 years being told I was too much of everything. Too tall, too strong, too different, too difficult. I do not know how to be anything other than what I am. Luke reached out and took her hand, his fingers threading through hers. Then do not be anything other than what you are. I do not want you smaller or quieter or different. I want you exactly as you are right now. Complicated and strong and brave and sometimes infuriating and always worth the effort. She looked down at their joined hands, his so much smaller than hers capable of breaking his bones without effort. Yet he held on without fear. You really believe we can do this? Build a life together despite everything against us? I believe we already are doing it. Every day we choose to stay. Every seed we plant. Every meal we share. That is life being built. Brick by brick. Moment by moment. He paused. We are both broken in ways that do not fix easily. I carry ghosts. You carry wounds. But maybe broken people can build something strong if they are honest about the cracks, if they do not pretend to be whole when they are not. Naalnish turned her hand, interlacing their fingers more firmly. Then we try. No promises about how it ends. Just a promise to be honest. To show up. To not run when things get hard. I can promise that. They sat in silence as the sun finished dying and stars began their nightly emergence. The same stars Naalnish had counted as a lonely child. The same stars she had looked at from the tree thinking she was about to die. But now she was not counting them to make herself feel small. She was simply appreciating their beauty, their constancy, the way they witnessed everything and judged nothing. It felt like peace, or at least the beginning of peace, which was all anyone could really ask for. 2 months after Luke's arrival, Elder Naki called a formal council meeting. He was barely able to stand now, his body consumed by the sickness eating him from within. But his mind remained sharp, and his voice, though weakened, still carried authority. The tribe gathered in the common area as the sun set. Naki stood in the center, supported by his walking staff and sheer force of will. Nalnish and Luke stood among the other adults, waiting to hear what decision had prompted this gathering. I am dying, Naki began without preamble. We all know this truth. The coughing sickness has taken root too deep to cut out. I have perhaps 1 turn of the moon left, maybe less if the spirits are merciful. He paused, his breath wheezing. Before I go, there are matters that must be settled. Chief among them, who will lead our warriors if we are attacked, who will make the hard decisions in dangerous times, who will be our war chief. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The position had been empty for 4 years, since the previous war chief had died in a skirmish with cavalry. I propose Naalnish. The murmurs became shouts, some of approval, many of protest. The noise rose like a wave. A woman stood, her face tight with anger. She is female. We have never had a female war chief. It goes against all tradition. We have never had someone who faced the white bear and lived either, Naki countered. Sometimes survival requires us to choose new paths. Tradition is important, but it should serve us, not trap us. A man stood next. She is cursed. Different. How can we trust someone so strange to lead us in battle? Naalnish had been waiting for this. She stepped forward before Naki could respond. I am not cursed. I am different. Those are not the same thing. You have feared my difference my entire life. That fear nearly destroyed me. It also nearly destroyed all of you. The bear fed on that fear, on that division. She let her voice carry to every ear. I do not want to lead because I think I am better than you. I want to lead because I understand what it means to be cast out, to be judged for things beyond my control. I will not do that to others. I will fight for everyone in this tribe, even those who fear me, even those who hate me, because that is what a real leader does. Chato stood, his voice cutting through the noise. I support Nalnish. She has proven herself braver than any warrior I know. She faced death and chose life. She faced hatred and chose forgiveness. I will follow her into battle without hesitation. Others began to stand. Not everyone. The crowd was clearly divided, but slowly voices of support began to outnumber voices of protest. An old warrior named Goyathlai stood. His face was stern, his body marked with the scars of a lifetime of fighting. I have fought in 20 battles. I have killed more enemies than I can count. And I say this woman has more courage in her smallest finger than most warriors have in their entire bodies. I support her as war chief. One by one, more people stood. More voices joined the chorus. Not universal, not even close. But enough. Enough to matter. Naki waited for the noise to die down, then spoke again. Then it is decided. Nyalnish is our war chief. May she lead with wisdom and strength. May she guide us through whatever dangers come. May we prove worthy of the gift she is giving us by accepting this burden. He turned to Nalnish. This responsibility is now yours. Carry it well. Nalnish felt the weight settle onto her shoulders like a physical thing. Heavy, undeniable, terrifying, but also right somehow. Like a piece of herself she had been missing had finally clicked into place. I will do everything in my power to honor this trust, she said, to protect this tribe, to lead with courage and compassion, to make decisions that serve the good of all, not just the powerful or the popular. She paused, looking around at the faces watching her. I know some of you still fear me, still doubt me, still wish someone else had been chosen. I cannot change your minds with words. I can only prove myself through actions, through the decisions I make, through the way I treat every member of this tribe with dignity and respect. She took a breath. I am your war chief now, but I am also still Nyalnish, still the girl who was tied to a tree and left to die, still the woman who chose to come back despite every reason to run. I remember what it feels like to be discarded, to be treated as less than human. I will never do that to anyone under my protection. That is my promise to you. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then slowly people began to nod, to murmur approval, to accept what had been decided. The meeting dispersed gradually. People moved back toward their shelters, their evening meals, their private conversations. But Nyalnish noticed that several people approached her before leaving, offered respectful nods, spoke words of support, or at least acceptance. It was a start. When the common area was mostly empty, Luke approached. He had been standing quietly at the edge throughout the entire proceeding, not wanting to interfere in tribal business. War chief, he said, and there was pride in his voice. That is quite a responsibility. Nalnish looked at him, suddenly afraid. Are you worried that I will be too busy for us now, that this will change things? He shook his head. I am proud, and no, I am not worried. We will figure it out. We always do. He took her hand. Besides, someone needs to keep the war chief fed and remind her to sleep occasionally. That is important work too. She smiled despite the nervousness churning in her stomach. Thank you for being here, for supporting this, even though it means my life just got more complicated. Our life just got more complicated, he corrected. We are in this together now, whatever it brings. That night, Nalnish could not sleep. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her like a physical burden. She lay in her shelter staring at the darkness, thinking about all the ways she could fail, all the people who were counting on her, all the decisions that would fall to her to make. Eventually, she gave up on sleep and walked outside. The camp was quiet. Most people were sleeping. Only a few fires still burned, tended by those on watch. She found Luke sitting by their fire whittling something from a piece of wood. He looked up when she approached. Could not sleep either. She shook her head and sat beside him. Too much in my head. Too many what-ifs. He set down his whittling and turned to face her. You are afraid of failing. Terrified. Good. That means you take it seriously. The leaders who do not fear failure are the dangerous ones. They make careless decisions because they think they cannot be wrong. What if I make a mistake that gets people killed? Then you will grieve and learn and try to do better next time. That is all anyone can do. He reached out and took her hand. You are going to make mistakes. Everyone does. But you are also going to make good decisions. Wise decisions. Brave decisions. And over time, the good will outweigh the bad. That is the best any leader can hope for. She looked at their joined hands. When I was on that tree waiting to die, I never imagined this. Never imagined I would have a life, a partner, a position of responsibility. It feels impossible sometimes. Impossible things happen every day, Luke said softly. A woman 8 feet tall exists when everyone says such a thing is cursed. A white bear made of shame and pain gets freed instead of killed. A cowboy who thought he would die alone falls in love with a giant who thought she was unlovable. Impossible things are just things that have not happened yet. Nalnish felt tears prick her eyes. I love you, she said. I do not think I have said that out loud yet, but I do. Love you. I love you too. Have since the moment you pushed me away after I cut you down. When you stood up even though your legs were shaking and you were terrified. When you chose pride over gratitude. That was when I knew you were extraordinary. They sat together in the firelight, two impossible people who had found each other against all odds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to fail or succeed. But tomorrow could wait. For now they had this moment, this fire, this connection. And that was enough. That was everything. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. The fire crackled and popped. Somewhere in the distance a coyote called and another answered. The world kept turning, and Nalnish, who had once been tied to a tree to die, sat beside the man she loved and felt something she had never felt before. Hope for a future she actually wanted to live to see. The bear was gone. The curse was broken. The real work of healing and building and becoming was just beginning. But she was ready. Finally, after 28 years of trying to be small enough to fit into spaces that were never meant for her, she was ready to be exactly as large as she was meant to be. A giant, a leader, a woman in love, a warrior who understood that the bravest battles were the ones fought inside your own heart. She was all of these things. 3 days later, young Outsay appeared at the edge of the garden where Nalnish was teaching Luke how to identify the first bean sprouts pushing through the soil. The girl held something carefully in both hands. "Can you teach me?" she asked. "Teach you what to shoot, like you did, like your father taught you." Nalnish looked at Luke. He smiled and nodded. She stood brushing dirt from her hands and walked to her shelter. When she returned, she carried the Springfield. She knelt beside Outsay, showing her how to hold the weight, how to sight down the barrel without touching the trigger. "You are small now," Nalnish said, "but you will grow, and when you do, you will be exactly as big as you are meant to be." "Will I be big like you?" the girl asked. Nalnish smiled. "Maybe, maybe not. But whatever size you become, it will be yours, and that will be enough." Luke watched from the garden, his hands deep in the earth he had helped turn, surrounded by the first green shoots of the life they were building together. The curse was broken. The real work had only just begun. And for the first time in 28 years, Nalnish stood in full sunlight teaching a child to be strong and felt no shadow of shame.